We are already over halfway through June, which means that your gardens should hopefully be planted, and that means that there are some crucial tasks that you should be doing in your garden this month. So I am going to take you through all of these tasks that you should be doing, could be doing, and want to be doing to make sure that your garden is as healthy as possible and your plants have everything that they need to grow well, so that way you get massive harvests this year. If you're new here, my name is Bree from Urban Gardening Canada, and I garden in Ottawa Zone 5. I'm going to be taking you around the garden today, showing you all of the things that you could be doing. This is for your perennial gardens, your vegetable gardens, even your fruit. If you're growing any of that, all of these tips will work for that. And I have a lot to do, so it's the perfect day to be showing you all of these tips. I have 9 different tasks that you can be doing around the garden. So come along with me and we will get to them, and we're gonna have a nice day out in the garden together. Let's go. So the first task that you can be doing is harvesting. So for me here, I have a bunch of cilantro, and behind me I have a ton of dill and kale. So not only am I harvesting my food right now to be eating fresh, but before I get any type of garden fatigue that comes in August or September where you're just tired from having to constantly be harvesting, I am going to be harvesting and dehydrating or preserving my food, because right now I am excited about the garden and I have a ton of energy. So I am going to harvest all of this cilantro and make a pesto with it. I have kale here that is ready to be harvested. So I am going to pick all of the kale that I need to, wash it up, let it dry, and then I'm going to freeze it because we love to have fresh greens over the winter time. So now is a perfect time that if you can't eat all of your kale fresh, or your herbs, especially cilantro and dill, which love the cool weather, while they are in their prime, I'm going to pick these and preserve them in different foods in the freezer, and this way they don't go to waste right now, because I'm not sure who can eat this much cilantro. This is a ton of cilantro, and then I get to benefit from it later in the year. So even though it's only June, it doesn't mean that it's too early to start thinking about winter and what you're preserving over that time. So keep that in mind as you wander around your garden. Save some for now to eat fresh and plant out another round of it while also preserving it for the fall. So your second task is to do any succession sowing that can be planted in June. So for example, I have my radishes here. So I have a space in my garden while I'm waiting for these sweet potatoes to fill out, and it makes for the perfect spot to be planting radishes. So I am going to make sure that I'm constantly having a new round of veggies coming out, especially ones like radishes that are harvested every 30 days. And lettuce is another one too that you want to be doing, because they grow from seed to harvest so quickly that you want to make sure that you always have an endless supply. All right, so the third task on the list is weeding, and I must admit I'm very embarrassed by how many weeds I actually have in this garden. It's almost impossible to tell what is an actual plant versus what is a weed, because the weeds have grown to the same size as all of my other plants here. But it does make it easy to identify what is a weed and what isn't. So it does make weeding a whole lot faster. But you do want to make sure that you keep your gardens well maintained from weeds, because weeds compete with your garden plants for both water and nutrients. So the more weeds that you do have in your garden, the more nutrients are going to them, the more water that's going to them, and the harder time your plants are having. So you do really want to make sure that you keep a really well weeded garden, and that way everything that is growing in the garden has what it needs in order to grow a big, strong plant, so that way you get the best harvest. So next up is pinching any plants that need it. So this would be a lot of your flowers like zinnias. They benefit from pinching them, so that way you get extra blooms. and basil is another one on the list. You do want to be pinching these so that way you get bushier blooms. Let me take you closer so you can see exactly how to do this one. Okay, so you can technically pinch right here. You can pinch anywhere you really want to, but I'm actually going to pinch all the way down here because this way I can eat all of this basil here, but the branching is going to start all the way down here, which means that my plant is going to get bigger and bushier. But by the time that this plant was the size it was, this stem is quite hard, so you don't want to just pinch it with one finger. Hold on to it or use scissors so that way you don't rip the whole plant out by the roots. But now I can eat all of this today at lunch or dinner while making sure that my plant is going to grow quite large and bushy. If you want extra tips on how to grow large bushy basil, make sure to check out my video that I have on that. I will link it in the description below, and you can grab the little card up here if you do want to watch it, and it's going to give you all the tips that you need to be able to grow a huge basil so that way you have a ton of harvest this season. So the next task is to prune your plants. Now this is more specific for plants like eggplants, peppers, zucchini, tomatoes, and I'm going to show you on the tomato plant here. But if you do have any dead leaves on your Swiss chard or your kale, you are going to want to clean those up as well, so that way the energy can go to the healthy plant and not to the dead leaves. But specifically with tomatoes, eggplants, and peppers, you don't want any of the leaves to be touching the soil, because when it rains or when you're watering, if that soil is splashing back and touching the leaves and there's any pathogens in there, that's how you're going to get different diseases like blight. So it's best to make sure that you keep your tomatoes pruned and all of your other plants pruned, so that way the leaves aren't touching the soil. Plus you want good airflow to get through your tomato for a couple of reasons. One being that it's healthier for the plant, and another that if we are getting any type of crazy weather, that you have enough airflow going through it that it's not just going to break the stem of the plant, but there's access for that air to blow through during windy days. So I'm going to take you through how to prune this specific tomato here. It needs a really good prune, and then that's going to take me into the next task. So let's get through this one first, and then we'll move on to the next one. So you can see that this plant is actually quite large and bushy, and I haven't been doing any pruning at all on it. I do have a separate video on specifically how to prune tomato plants, so I will link that in the description below for you. But right now, my main goal is to make sure that none of these leaves are resting on the ground. I want to try and clear up the main stem so that way we can access it. And now at this point too, you can be cutting off any of the suckers. However, I personally like to leave them because it just means that you're going to get more tomatoes. And especially if you're growing a determinate variety, you really don't want to be cutting off any stems that can be flowering, because that's going to directly impact how much you harvest. But hopefully you're starting to be able to see the bottom now and how much more clear it is, because this means that there's less chances of anything touching the soil here. So this is how much I cut off, which is quite a large amount. And I am going to add this to my compost bin. Okay, so now that the tomato has been pruned, it takes me into the next task, and that is staking or supporting your plants. Normally, I like to add my stakes into as soon as I plant my plants, because if you start staking your plants a couple weeks, a month, 2 months after you've planted it in the garden, there's two issues that happen. Number one is you're going to be damaging the roots as you jam a stake into a plant that has an established root ball. And the second thing is that you can't really control how it's been growing. So I didn't stake this one in time. It does have a really small stake in the back here, but the only reason that I had staked it was because it tipped over in the rain and the wind. And so now you can see it's kind of growing on a bit of an angle. And that's specifically because I didn't stake it in time. So it's really important to be doing that now while your plants are still small and you're able to control it. And I do tie mine up with sisal rope because this is a biodegradable material. So this is a lot more eco-friendly in your garden than using any type of plastic. And you should never be using metal in your garden either. whenever you're tying up a plant, you always want to use a material that is the same strength or weaker than your plant is. So for example, a tomato stem is going to be stronger than sisal rope, or at least on the same level. However, metal ties are way stronger than a tomato plant is. So if you put a metal tie around your tomato plant and the stem grows to the same thickness as how much gap you left around your stake, it is going to cut into the stem of your plant, and that is going to cause damage to your plant and leave it open for different pathogens. The other issue is that if there's wind and it's constantly pushing on that metal tie, then it is going to cut the stem and damage it. So it's always important to use something that is equal in strength or weaker than the actual stem is, and sisal rope fits the bill for being the most eco-friendly option while also not damaging the stem as it's growing around it. Now, the other thing that you want to do is to make sure that you're always leaving space. And so what it does do is allow it to move a little bit, which might be a concern to you, but as long as you stay on top of staking it, it shouldn't be an issue. But it just allows, as your plant is small, especially now in June, the stem is not the same thickness as it's going to be at the end of August. So you always just want to make sure that you tie it loose to allow space for that stem to thicken up without getting too tight that you either have to cut it or it damages the plant before you have time to fix it. So with that, let's get into staking this. The first thing I'm going to do is add in a taller stake, because this stake is already, the plant's already outgrown the stake. Again, I don't really like to do this, but I'm going to do it, and then we're going to tie it up. So I am going to push this stake in as deep as it can go in the garden. I am keeping it about 2 inches away from the base of the plant. And I also put it, the first stake is on this side, which is on the left, my left of the plant, and this one's on the right. And that just gives it extra support as it grows more suckers on it, because it's just going to keep on getting bigger. So you can already see most likely that it's like a C shape, this plant, and that's because of my lack of supporting it when I should have been. So I'm going to support it on the original stake first, and then I'm going to come back for the taller stake after. So I am going to put it across this other one here, and I'm going to make it a really, really loose tie, but this just means that as it straightens out towards the sunlight, that I'll be able to start supporting it properly after that. But the stem is actually all the way down here, and it's curving all the way here and then curving all the way back, and that's all because I didn't stake it in time. All right, so as I'm doing this, I am staking my plant, weeding out weeds. I'm about to prune it. So this is literally everything that I've been telling you so far in this video are things that you'll want to be doing. And never prune your tomato plant with your hands, because if you damage the stem and rip off the outer skin on it, all you're doing is leaving your plant open to getting more disease. So it's really important to be using shears when you're doing this to make sure that you get a proper cut on your plant and you don't end up damaging the stem, because then it defeats the entire purpose of pruning. And the other thing about pruning is that you do want to make sure that you prune it in such a way that it makes it easy for you to be able to stake your plant. So if there's some leaf stems in the way of the main stem where you put in your stake, like, don't be afraid to prune them so that way you get access to the plant. So because the staking and supporting your plant is more important than the one leaf stem that you're cutting off. Okay, your next step is to check for insect damage so that way you can take care of it early. And in June, the most common insects that you're going to be finding are the leaf miner, cabbage moths, and sadly the cucumber beetles are already out as well. So I will show you how to check for that. I don't have any cucumber beetles here right now, so I will put in some pictures for you on their damage and how you can deal with them. I will put a link below because I have an article on my website on how to manage that. But I do have leaf miner right now, and I'll also quickly show you how to look for cabbage moth damage. However, I also don't have that right now. I oddly have cabbage moths every so often flying through my backyard, but they don't stick around even though I am growing cabbage, cauliflower, and kale, which they absolutely love. But I will give you an idea. Even though I don't have any actual damage, I'll show you how to do that. And then I do have leaf miner right here, right now, so I will show you how to check for that one. Okay, so this is a spinach plant, and you can see right here, this is telltale signs of leaf miner damage, which is a translucent leaf. And inside of there is where the insect is going to be living. And so you have a few different options. The first one is to just pick off the damaged leaves and then continue to go about eating your plant the way it is. The second option is you can actually peel open these leaves and look for the insect in it, and you can just squish around and pinch on these leaves to help kill it so that way it doesn't continue to damage this specific leaf. And then the final option is to actually look at the underside of the leaves, and if you find any white eggs, that's what they are being laid in, and you're just going to want to clean up and squish any of those eggs. I am not finding any on this spinach plant, but I will be able to show it to you on my Swiss chard. So Swiss chard tend to be a favorite of the leaf miner, so this is a really good place to be looking for leaf miner eggs. You can actually see that there is a significant amount of them on the back of this leaf. So all of these white dots on the back of this leaf here, here, and here, these are all leaf miner eggs. And so what you're going to want to do is you're literally just going to scrape them away. And doing this every single day or every couple of days is going to prevent you from getting any of this leaf miner damage on here. And so you can either choose to harvest the leaves and eat around it, or you can compost the whole leaf, but they're still totally fine to be eaten, even though they do have damage on them. And it's really important to maintain this because they can cause a lot of damage to your leafy greens, and you really don't want that. You want to make sure that they're for you. Okay, so here is one of my cauliflower plants. Again, I don't have any cabbage moths on them right now, but I will show you what to look for on it, and we'll just pretend, and then I'll throw in some pictures on here to help you really get an idea of it. But let's look at this specific cauliflower and I'll show you where it'll be looking. So the first thing that you want to be doing is looking for any type of holes on the leaves. So it can come along the edges of it, or it can be actual holes in the center of it. So if you see any eaten parts on it, then you do have cabbage worms, and they're quite hidden, and a lot of times they'll show up on the underside of the leaves. So you just want to make sure you're looking at the top and the bottom of your leaves to find any of these camouflaged insects, and then you're just going to want to peel them off and squish them. And the second thing that you want to be doing is looking in the center where the leaf stem meets the stalk, because if you notice any brown balls, this is the insect frass or the insect poop. And as they're eating, they tend to poop where they eat, and you'll find the insect frass on the center of there. So just check there as well. And then finally, you can actually look on the underside of the leaves for eggs. They're quite small. They're just really small, greeny yellow eggs on them, and you're just going to wipe them off. The only thing is you do want to be aware of what ladybug eggs look like, because you want to wipe off cabbage moth eggs, but not ladybug eggs, and they can be somewhat similar. So it's just really important to make sure that you know the difference of which is which. So before we move on to the fruit tree maintenance for June, there is one last tip to do for your gardens back here, and that is to mulch. And I am going to mulch my garden with comfrey because this is what I have on hand, but you can use dried up grass clippings, straw, switchgrass, or wood chips. I personally say to only use wood chips in perennial gardens versus your vegetable garden. So if you have something that is faster to break down, such as grass clippings, that's the one that I suggest you go with. But you just want to avoid it if you have recently mowed the lawn and it was wet. You don't want it to be too fresh. And if the weeds in your lawn are currently seeding, then you don't want to be using that. But otherwise, it's a great mulch to be using because it's really high in nitrogen. If you want to learn more about comfrey, I do have articles on my website as well as videos all about it. So if you want to add this to your garden, since it is such a good living mulch, I highly recommend checking those out, and I'll leave them in the link below for you. Now, I don't want to be putting the mulch on too thick in the front here because this is where I just sowed my radish seeds. So I want to make sure that they have access to get out. But adding mulch to your garden means that it is going to slow down the growth of weeds. It's going to hold in moisture, so that way you have to water less, especially if it's dry where you are. And it also helps build up the soil. So as it breaks down, it's adding nutrients for your plants. It's feeding all of the living beings inside your soil, like the microbes and the insects. And that means that your soil is going to be healthier. And healthy soil holds more carbon in it, which is what we need during this time of our climate emergency. And it also means that your plants are going to give you a better harvest. So in the springtime, you want to mulch not as thick as you do in the fall. And all of this is actually in my self-paced course that I have online. So if you want to learn more about mulching and different ways to build up your garden soil and have a stronger garden while we are experiencing all of this weather that's happening, then I recommend you check it out. I will put it in the link below, and you actually can get a free preview of the course. And I also talk about growing your own fertilizers such as comfrey. So all of this can be found in there to build a stronger, more resilient garden. Okay, so the final task for the June garden is to cover up any of your fruiting bushes or trees, especially if you don't want the birds and the animals to get to it first. This is a white currant bush that I have where I already have a insect bag over top of it, but I am going to go over to my cherry tree because I am going to switch out what I currently have on it for the insect netting bag because I finally found it. So we're going to go over there and do it together. Okay, so right now I have insect netting because I wasn't able to find my insect netting bag. So right now my cherry tree is covered with insect netting that I just tied around the base. And I put a stake on the top of it just to help, so that way it doesn't crush the entire cherry tree and all of the branches on it. So this is one option that you can use if you don't have access to anything else. And so I'm just going to untie it now. We make a joke that it's the ghost in our front lawn that's helping keep away anything bad. So this is just your basic insect netting row cover that you can get to put over top of any of your plants. So this is really good to use on hoops with your cabbages or your broccoli or cauliflower if you don't want the cabbage moth on it, your kale, spinach, any of those. This will protect your plants from the cabbage moth and leaf miner. And so I have a whole video on hoop houses that you can check out if you want to know exactly how to use this to be the most beneficial. However, I am going to be using this giant insect netting bag that I have. And what I like about it is it has a drawstring on the bottom. So this way I can tighten it easily so that way no animals can climb up it. All right. So this one is nicer because it's not as heavy as the insect netting is. so it's not pushing on the branches quite the same way that the insect netting was. And then we just tighten it on the bottom. And that is everything for today's video. If you enjoyed this video and found it helpful, make sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in this video here. Bye.